going on, my home studio addicts? Joel from the Home Recording Network hanging out in the studio today with a little tutorial for you guys on how to eliminate tom bleed from your home recorded drums. Now, if you are anything like me from years ago and you record drums at your home, you have probably struggled with getting rid of the tom bleed from your drums. And you've probably wondered, "Oh, what's the right way to do this?" You've seen a ton of techniques out there. But today I'm going to show you the best way to eliminate the tom bleed from your drums. And, the tom bleed is awful. You hear the cymbals and snare in your tom microphones, and you want to get rid of it. And maybe the gate isn't quite doing it, and you think there might be a better way. So that's what I'm going to go over today. Okay, so we are in a project. We have some instruments recorded here, and let's just play a little bit. And you see, we have this tom fill right here, and I'll solo the drums up. Yeah, so those drums sound great. Let's take a closer look at what we're doing with the toms. So if we just solo the tom bus, let's listen to the bleed. Sounds kind of weird, but there's no bleed in there, is there? So my first tip for you is to cut anywhere that the toms are not being played. So if we look through this whole mix, I have clipped the track wherever the toms aren't being played. No need to have those mics on. But if you just clip the tracks, then you're gonna hear some weird stuff. So you're gonna hear the tom come in, you're gonna hear all that bleed, and then the track is just gonna kind of end. So it's gonna sound kind of strange in the whole mix if you just clip the track. So we got to go a little bit further than that. So let's just use the high tom for our example today. And if we look on the channel strip here, we have an SSL channel, which is just doing some EQ and compression. Then I have a Pro Q2 on here with just a narrow cut, just some additional EQ. And if you look, I have another instance of Pro Q2 below it, and then I have a gate. So these two plugins, the last two, are going to be the ones we're talking about today. So let's just listen with the last two plugins disabled, and we're going to hear all that nasty bleed. And again, it just ends, which is not what we want, because if we hear that in context of the drums, you're gonna hear that bleed there, and it's just gonna kind of end, which is gonna sound unnatural. So let's show how we remedy this. So let's take a peek at the Pro Q2 down here, and I have this by default on all of my tom tracks. I start with this plugin with this high cut all the way up. So it's not actually doing anything. So it's just a high cut or a low pass filter that's not doing anything. And what we do with this is we automate this down to 1K after the tom is struck. So in this case, we have multiple hits on the tom. So I'm not going to automate this until the last time that it hits the tom. So let's just open up our automation mode here. And what I do is instead of automating automation, I select the automation to control this instance of Pro Q2. And what I do is I set it to the band 1 frequency. So there's only one band that we've created in Pro Q2, and that's that high cut. So this is going to control the frequency. So After this tom is struck for the last time, it's gonna go down to about 1K. So let's just bring this Pro Q2 up and we'll enable it and we'll show you what it's doing here. There you go. So we can still hear all that bleed, but since we lowered the cut down to 1K, it's not really going to be audible with the rest of the drums. And I'll show you that again real quick. Yeah, and when you're doing this, it's nice to use the Marquee Tool. So I select the Marquee Tool and I would select the region I want here. And I would just click, and then it lets us just drag this down. I don't want to go through and select an automation point, select another one, and drag it down. So the Marquee Tool will help you do this real quickly, because if you see, we've done this at all the tom hits in the song. So it does take a little bit to do this, but it shouldn't take you that long. And again, we're doing this with the low tom as well. So if I just solo the low tom, it's going to do the same cut. Yeah, and I would suggest making that cut right after the tom is struck. So like immediately after. And the reason this is going to work is because all the attack and the high end for the toms, those don't really resonate. So the low end is what is going to trail off. So we still want to hear that low end trail off. And that low end's not going to be affected because we're only making this cut down to about 1K. Okay, so that should work for you. But if you want to take it to another level, you can then add a gate afterwards, which is going to even cut off some of the bleed that you can still kind of hear from the snare here. So you can throw on your gate. So for this instance, I just used Pro G and used their high tom gate. And let's hear it now. Yeah, so we get rid of some of those additional snare hits there. And for tom gates, you want your release to be a little bit longer. And you see I have the hold up here to 200 milliseconds. That's because we still want to hear, again, that low end ringing out from the tom. So let's listen to them both together. And now in the context with the overall drums. And that's perfect. We don't have any of that nasty bleed in there. And this should really get you where you need to go if you are struggling with maybe just gating your toms. This is definitely going to help you out. Guys, thanks for watching. Make sure to download your free Ultimate Home Studio Mix Guide. I made this for you guys so you could start getting your mixes sounding better. There's a lot of great information in there. And be sure to reach out if you have any questions or if you need any help with your mixes. Thanks.